All right. Hopefully, I'll figure out how to put this at the beginning, but I sort of go on about. Well, first off, I forgot to talk about something, so let me get over that really quick. If you're not watching the One Championship Muay Thai with 4-ounce gloves, and this is not an ad, I have not been paid to say this. If you're not watching the One Championship Muay Thai in 4-ounce gloves, what are you doing with your life? Because it's so freaking exciting. Like, if you're into exciting, fast-paced striking, it's one of the best things you can watch. Caught Rod Tang versus Haggerty 2 in the morning the other day, and I had seen the first one, and it was amazing. And it was an absolute slobber knocker. Like, Rod Tang is a tank, and he just made it an absolute brawl. Haggerty sort of accepted it, but there's just one thing I want to point out. Like, if you want to watch it, you can watch them all on YouTube for free. So, Rod Tang versus Haggerty 2. At one point, Haggerty goes to kick Rod Tang, and Rod Tang catches the kick, and then with the other hand, he grabs behind the neck, and they get into a single collar clinch with Haggerty's kick still caught on the other side, and then Haggerty goes to kick out Haggerty catches a kick from Rod Tang, so Rod Tang ties up, and then Haggerty ties up as well with his other hand. And then Haggerty goes to kick Rod Tang's leg, and Rod Tang jumps over it like he's skipping rope with the one leg that he's standing on. And it made me go like, whoo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Like out loud with no one in the room. So I just wanted to point that out. What a great fight. I wish it could have gone on longer, but they have 2 fights you can look up. It was fantastic. I'll always watch a John Haggerty fight. They're always exciting. What else? Okay, the other thing is that I kind of go over why Throwin Bones MMA podcast hasn't put one up in a while. If you don't really care about the horrible job I do at explaining personal reasons for not being able to record and put up the podcast, then you can check the description, and it'll have a timestamp for just skipping my babbling, which I'm already doing. So check the description. You can skip ahead. That's it. Hello, and welcome back to a new year of the Throwin Bones MMA podcast. We got a new episode for you this week. Big card, because of the headline, of course. But before we get to that, I just smacked my lips super hard into the microphone. Sorry about that. Before we get started, Throwin Bones MMA podcast has been away for a little while, since about early November. I just did it again. See, I'm rusty. Since about early November. We've been working on changing some things about the platform, especially since our website URL for most of the articles is now banned on Facebook for being spam. We weren't able to get that resolved, mostly because Facebook just doesn't respond to anything that you try to do, or any requests or reviews that you call into question. So we're working on possibly changing the host and the website that we work on. There was also a litany of personal issues. I don't know how far I want to get into those, but it was everything from personal injury to apartment fumigation for bed bugs. Luckily, it was the neighbors that had it and not us, but we didn't have access to the area all the same. Personal injury, maybe a mental breakdown or two, living in the clutter. And generally, I'm just happy for 2020 to be here. Because the end of 2019 really kicked me in the nuts. So, Throwin Bones MMA podcast took a back seat for a little bit. That really pained me. I feel like I owe this to myself and to everyone every week to do this, because it's so much fun, and I respect the sport so much. But, you know, sometimes life gets in the way, and that had to be dealt with. And I think if I hadn't have put everything on the back burners for so long, I might not be back doing it already. I think sometimes you need to recognize that there's some serious issues that need to come first. So if you want to know any more about that, the website itself does have the email linked. I respond to everyone who emails. If you want to know if I'm okay, or if why episode hasn't come out this week, the email is the most efficient way to reach us, just because I'm not super social media minded, and the dinging on my phone drives me nuts. So I will put a little blurb in at the beginning, so you can skip all that crap if you don't want to hear about me or my personal life, because I totally understand. I didn't even really like talking about it there, and I feel like I did an awful job, honestly, at conveying, where I've been and why I haven't been doing this. And I feel like I owe a better explanation, but I just don't exactly know how to give one without it sounding like a huge pity party, and that's no fun. So I'm going to go back and put something at the beginning so you can skip all this. Another thing, before we get started, Yorgan De Castro just got announced for a huge fight against Greg Hardy. Yorgan De Castro is a friend of the show. Before the little universe-imposed hiatus that I just took, me and Kyle, we did a fantastic interview with Yorgan, and we've got that recorded. I just need to get that polished up and put out, and I think that's even more fantastic now that he's got this big fight booked. I'm really happy for him. I can't wait for him to whoop some ass, and I need to watch the swearing because of YouTube's new policy. But back to Yorgan. I think he's going to do great, and I'm pretty sure we even have a pretty long conversation about the possibility of him taking on Greg Hardy in that interview, which was done a couple months before. I'm really kicking myself for not getting that out at least, but what can we do? And again, another one before we get started. We missed a couple events. I'm not going to go over them in detail, but I do need to eat some crow. Usman versus Covington. I predicted that to be the snooze fest to end all snooze fests. And I even, because of how long the card was, I know that was a bit of a talking point after the card, was how long it took to get to that fight. The 3 title fights all pretty much going the distance was a bit of a stretch. Probably not something they expected, especially with Nunes and Durandamy on the card, but boy, they had a slobber knocker. I expected that just to be an absolute wrestle fest, and I really think I disparaged not their talent at all, but their willingness to put on a show. I definitely I underestimated their animosity towards each other, and that was just a great fight. Just an absolutely great fight. It was a sloppy slugfest, and that's the type of fight that got me into this sport. And it's the type of fight it's like a refreshing drench of cold water every once in a while when that 2 high-level fighters just decide they're going to throw caution and their main skill set to the wind and throw down. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the poetic justice of Colby Covington getting his jaw broke was great. I wish we could have seen him win, mostly just because I think he would have tried to do I think he was building up for a face turn to turn into the good guy. Oh, they made me do this. After he won his belt, and I would have loved to see him handle that, since he can't deliver a line to save his life. So even though it's something he's been practicing for probably for ever since he started doing his little gimmick, I would have loved to see him win the belt, try to turn face, and then inevitably not deliver everything the way he should, and then, I don't know, probably become more of a Cejudo character than a hatred character, just someone who makes us cringe. But oh well, sometimes you just get a really exciting fight, and that's awesome instead. But I did have to, I felt like if I didn't come and talk about that, I'd feel like I was avoiding it, because I was so adamant about that fight. I had such strong opinions about it. Me and Kyle had gotten into a lot of arguments over it, and I was wrong. I was totally wrong, and that's probably one of the most exciting things about this sport, is just how much you think you can know about it, and then how often it just proves you completely wrong. I thought I had their styles pegged, but it was one of the classic 2 grapplers get into a sloppy striking match, and it was fantastic. All right, so then I guess we'll start on what's going to be the main chunk of this episode. I don't think this is going to be a super long episode. We don't have a lot of news. I might talk about Jessica Penne and USADA. I might talk a little bit about a 165 division, but mostly it is just a crisp, chilly, -40 morning in Calgary, Alberta. I'm sitting here in the housecoat with a dog on my lap and a nice fresh brewed cup of coffee, and we're just chatting. That's what it is today. We're just chatting. You know, maybe at some point I'll do some ASMR. Since I smack my mouth so much. But, all right, McGregor versus Cerrone. Thoughts. It's hard getting excited for this fight. And for so many reasons. You know, there's the classic, you know, it's hard to get excited about a McGregor fight, you know, when he hasn't fought in 3 years and his last couple fights were losses, and that's not as much it for me. It's you know, why do I care about this fight? For McGregor, for so long, he was always taking on this inconquerable challenge, and it was always something where it's like, you hear him say this stuff and you're like, I don't think he can do it, but I'm done doubting him. And, you know, the doubts crept in. And I think mostly it's that I don't see the purpose for this fight. And Conor doesn't really either. Like, it seems like there's a bit of a truth to the matchmaking of this fight that everyone's sort of skirting around. And that is, you know, Donald Cerrone coming off a 2-fight TKO skid, one against Tony Ferguson and then another against Justin Gaethje, where he got knocked out in the first round. Hasn't taken a ton of time off since then, so you know he's still vulnerable. He's getting up there in age. Like McGregor said, you know, since their little press conference spat, he's fought probably 20 times, and that, you know, that you can see with Cowboy's last couple fights that's starting to take a toll on him a little bit. But it's mostly the archetypes of the fight. It's the style matchup of it, and it seems disingenuous. And it seems to me like Cowboy was cherry-picked to be not an easy win, but a launching pad for McGregor. And it would be easier to be excited about this fight if it was, you know, that you've had McGregor say, like, I could beat him with the flu. Well, then why are you fighting him, right? If it's not a challenge, and he said this multiple times, you know, I could beat him with one hand, and he said this about past opponents before, but he says that, and you're like, yeah, you maybe could, because obviously not literally, but you've got Donald Cerrone. He struggles against fast starters. He struggles against southpaws. He struggles against counter strikers. He struggles against pressure fighters. And a lot of the times he lets the moment get to him. And if you think about what Conor McGregor brings to a fight, he creates a giant moment that a lot of fighters haven't experienced before, and they crumble under the pressure. He's a counter striker. He's a pressure fighter. He works the body. You know, Cowboy is notorious for being vulnerable to body shots. And he's a fast starter. So it's all the thing. Every single box you could go down and check and say this is probably a weakness for Cerrone plays directly into McGregor's strengths. It's a bit of a layup of a fight, if I am honest, and it's, for me, what it gives me, especially when the talk of this is going directly to a Masvidal fight, going from like a Masvidal fight after, if he wins this, fighting Masvidal and then going to Khabib. It's just jumping around the real contenders. He's mentioned Gaethje more. I've said before that he won't even put Gaethje on his like radar at all. He won't even mention Gaethje. He started to for the past little while, but apparently I think his excuse was that Gaethje had brought up the sexual assault allegations, and he didn't want that sort of negativity associated with his image for this comeback fight. But I don't know. It just gives me the boxing feeling. And if he planned on fighting a bunch more times, that'd be different. Like, go ahead and take a tune-up fight. This isn't even an easy tune-up fight. Like, it's not going to be a complete blowout at all. But this is as close as you can get to cherry-picking favorable matchmaking in the UFC as you're really going to. Like, at what point does the favorable matchmaking for McGregor stop if he's going to be a top-level lightweight? When he was asked himself, why is this an interesting fight? Why Donald? And he's just kind of like, because I said I would, because we had a spat at a press conference 5 years ago, and because he's a family man. Nothing about where this gets him into the division. Nothing about Donald's accomplishments other than purely how much he's fought. Whereas if he was fighting Gaethje in this fight, where does this fight get you? And it's not even like he's coming out and just saying, well, this gets my foot in the door. I've been gone for 3 years. I want to get the rust off. I want to see where I'm at competitively. This is another fan favorite fighter. And this is just getting my foot in the door. And I don't plan on getting back to the title within the year because I'm going to take it slow and I'm going to build my momentum back up. I'm on board. If you go that route, I'm absolutely on board. But that's just not what he's saying. He's still he's like, I'm still planning on doing boxing. I'm still planning on fighting Khabib by the end of the year. I'm sorry, but a trajectory of 3 fights, starting with Donald Cerrone, doesn't get you to Khabib. Unless Khabib loses against Tony. That's what it is. But you're not getting, you shouldn't. And that's the part that I think gets a lot of people and is what's getting me sort of melancholy and sort of unenthusiastic about this fight, is that it's like, yeah, well, if he wins this, like, and it's picked so that he's probably going to win it. And if he wins it, they're just going to fast track him to another title shot that he doesn't deserve over the top of people who, probably deserve it more. Gaethje being one of them. If he was fighting Gaethje and you asked him why Gaethje, he could say, well, look what he's done in the past. He lost to Eddie Alvarez and he lost to Poirier, and then he completely changed up his fighting style, and now he's gone on a 3-fight knockout streak. Each time the competition getting better and better until he knocked out Cerrone in the first round. He's the number 1 contender after that, and so if I knock off the number 1 contender, I'm absolutely in line for the title shot. I just don't understand the logic behind it. There doesn't seem to be much. It's just sort of like watch McGregor fight. And you can tell by the way they've built the rest of this card, it's not as bad as I had originally thought. But this is the first card for a long time, and because of the preferential treatment, because of some of the stuff that's come out about him in the news in the past, and because of honestly the way I enjoyed his fights and I enjoyed him as a character, and he sort of got me into mixed martial arts in a serious way. And now he's completely turned that around. He's betrayed sort of, my admiration and my inspiration that I've gotten from him in some of the stuff he's done. And, that has kind of turned me sour on him. I think he's going to win this fight, but I'm absolutely cheering for Cerrone because I want him to mess up this grand architect, this constructed scheme of his where he's going to bounce back to Khabib in 2 fights without even fighting at lightweight. I think the Masvidal as an end of the year goal is much more valuable. I'd rather see him go after the BMF belt. That is the genre of the fight game that he's in right now. And he's shown it with taking the fight against Cerrone. This isn't the I'm back and I'm a serious contender fight. This isn't the type of fight you take that's going to make a statement and say, I'm back and I'm back to rule this division the way I should have been from the beginning. This, to me, this is surrendering yourself to the fun gimmick fight, which is fine. This is the pay-per-view buys McGregor. It's the Mayweather McGregor. That's what it is. He's trying to make as much money as possible, but all this stuff about him caring about him trying to be the Muhammad Ali of the sport and of trying to leave his legacy and his mark on it. I don't know. This isn't the comeback fight to do that for me. And so I have a hard time getting excited about it because it seems manufactured. In McGregor keeps trying to say, this is as real as it gets, but I've never felt so much like this is a manufactured boxing setup fight or a WWE squash match. I can't remember the last time I watched a pay-per-view main event that I was this confident about the outcome and this disinterested because of the practices that seem to be going on behind the scenes. I haven't seen anything for this fight. Like, the build-up for this fight has been inconsequential. I haven't seen it. For a McGregor fight, this has been one of the quietest fight weeks I've ever seen. The embeddeds aren't even at the top of the Reddit subreddit. You see that video that Pete Carroll did, and then the interview that he did on The Athletic. People in Ireland went from flying across the country to watch him fight, and having his fights being shown in pubs after he had fought. People would crowd around just to watch him win again. You wouldn't be able to walk down the street without seeing his face or a quote, or people spilling out in the streets drinking, watching his fights. A reporter wouldn't be able. Pete Carroll is a well-known Irish reporter on MMA. Says he wouldn't. At the height of McGregor 2015, 2017, he wouldn't be able to go down to the pub and get a drink without people harassing him about McGregor's newest this and newest that, or what's he up to, what's he doing next, what's his mindset at. What's it like talking to him? All that type of stuff. And now he says no one even talks to him about it. He did that video getting Irish people's opinion on McGregor now. Most of them didn't even know he was fighting. He used to be, like Carroll said in the interview, he used to be front and back page news. Front and back page news, and now there wasn't even a single advert in any of the newspapers that he picked up saying that he's fighting this weekend. A lot of people he tried to interview for that video would only trash him and say, I'm not even going to give him the clout of talking about him on camera. They would just trash him privately. And Pete said, people say that I tried to pick and choose cuts from that video to make it seem like people hated him, make it seem, bad, to disparage McGregor, but those are the only people that would talk to me. In reality, most people told me he was an asshole and they didn't want to talk about him, and they told me to leave them alone, and they don't even want to give him the time of day. So to go from being the complete hero of of multiple generations, the defining sports icon of an entire country, and someone that people as a whole are willing to fly across the world for and stay in Vegas just to watch you fight. And like pretty much spending their life savings. Like, people spent their life savings on this guy to support him. And then he turns around, and because he gets all this money from their support, he goes around and he has this sort of, like he said, this cliche fighter losing it all, losing control because of all the money, and he isn't used to it and doesn't know how to handle it. But that's exactly what he had become. And what he sold himself as before that was that he exactly wasn't going to become that. He had directly referenced it. He had said, I'm not going to go down that path. So for him to turn around and just go psycho like that, and for them to hold him up as an icon of the Irish people, as a representative of the Irish identity and the Irish culture at that time, and young Ireland, for him to turn around and to use that representation as that icon to begin to do all these thuggish activities, and then of course the other allegations don't help at all. He's really he betrayed a whole nation. Can you imagine spending your life savings on that guy multiple times to fly to Las Vegas and New York to support him in the Aldo fight, to support him in the Alvarez fight, and then to learn about these allegations, about him assaulting people, stealing their phones, stomping on them, punching the old man in the bar? And I think that's really undersold over here. That's another thing from that interview that I garnered, is like popular opinion really changed on the guy. Over here, it would be with the sexual assault allegations. That's what's going to lose you your fans over here. But in Ireland, it was punching the old man at the pub. It's like punching a nun. It's like part of the community down there. The community pub, the guy who's been drinking there forever, he's the patriarch. He's the patriarch of that part of the culture. They're the guys, they tell stories, they're the kin keepers. they're not only an intricate but an honored part of the fabric of that community. And it sounds silly and it sounds almost racist to be like the drunk old guy in the bar is a really important part of Irish culture. But the pub is a big part of their culture. It is. And so that is quite literally, I can't exactly think of the equivalent for where I'm from at the moment. Maybe it's like punching the Zamboni driver or something. But it's just something you don't do. And that's apparently what really changed the public opinion of him. It was we've held you up as a representation of who we are. And now you've completely disgraced something that we hold dear to our identity as well. So you've become antithetical with our cultural fabric. And he's been completely rejected. Almost as effectively and as efficiently as he was accepted. And that's really sad. That's really sad. And so it's sort of this weight of this sadness of this him becoming a cliche, and then he's coming back and getting the catered, cherry-picked boxing route back to the title. All of this is making me sad because it's this guy who went from representing exactly what was great and exactly what was fantastic and compelling and inspiring, and he epitomized, he hyperbolized, and he personified what was great about cage fighting, and what made me want to devote so much time into it, and what made me inspired to take these lessons that I learn from the people that do this sport and apply them to my own life and get somewhere and make something of myself. It's all of these positive emotions that he's betrayed, that he's gone back on, and that it seems like he's sort of defiled them. So it's really hard to get excited for a fight when he's coming back and he's still in his essence, just with the very person that he chose, seems to be betraying exactly what the sport's all about. I think that's why it's hard for me to get excited for this. It's not any one part of it. It's not just if he wanted to fight Cowboy, that's fine. But it's after all of this, after everything that's happened, this is your comeback fight, and you can't even give me a good reason for why you're doing it. Just because it's just kind of because you wanna, and then also with the context of the past and what he meant, and with the context of what's probably going to happen in the future and what the desire is and what they're gunning for, what the master plan is going into the future, within the context of the future and the past, it's really hard to believe in him and get excited for him in the present. Even though we've been seeing him more zen, calm, he seems more like the old McGregor than he did during the Floyd pressers or during the Khabib interviews leading up to the Khabib fight. We're going to see, obviously. We're going to see, he's much older now. He's only 31, but he's been out for 3 years and he's been living hard. We're going to see. I want Cowboy to win. I'm going to be cheering for Cowboy with every ounce of my being, because for me, there's nothing better than when all these things are orchestrated. And you can tell they really want a certain thing and a certain outcome, and they're planning for it and they're gearing for it, and they've sort of orchestrated it so that it's probably going to happen that way, and then it all comes tumbling down because you can't control what happens in the 8 walls of the octagon. That's my favorite part about this sport. It's that I get to be wrong, and I get to watch other people completely be wrong, and then on top of that, not only are those people wrong, someone gets a moment. Someone gets a moment where everything is conquered and everything has now worked out for the little guy and everything's fair. And I hope that happens for Donald Cerrone at this. And that's where I'm getting my motivation to watch this from. It's on that off chance that I'm going to see Donald Cerrone have his Michael Bisping moment and conquer the world. I don't think Cerrone's ever going to get anywhere near a title, but for him to beat Conor McGregor and then, maybe call out Masvidal for a rematch or something like that, just to get his moment, because no one deserves it more than Cerrone. How long has he been fighting? How many times has he fought? He's fought so much that he's worked his way into the casual fandom. People know Cowboy that I've been talking to. I talk to people about this fight. They're like, yeah, and it's Cowboy though. And because they know Cowboy, they think it's going to be this really close fight. I hope it ends up being a close fight. I hope Cowboy ends up winning. But to me, this just seems like such a setup. He seems like he's the patsy for this fight, and I hope he destroys that narrative with a head kick. I don't know. That's really all I got to say about that. No one deserves it more than Cowboy. So, all right, let's look at the rest of. I'm gonna take a break here, take a sip of my coffee, and look at the rest of this card, see what the hell I want to talk about. And I know Grasso's on it. I know Touchy Feely's fighting Sadiq Yusuf. So it's a decent card. It's a decent card. They definitely didn't go all out with name value. They're relying on the McGregor effect, but especially on the undercard, this is a very, very decent card. And we'll be back right after I chug some coffee. All right, sip. Oh wait, one more. We're gonna have one more sip of coffee on mic. Delicious. Sniffing to the mic too. Okay, good. I'm almost cleared up. So that was another thing that kept me away. I had a couple weeks of sickness. Went out, had the holidays with the family, and then came back and got sick again from playing with the kids. But you know, they love it, so it's worth it. Okay, let's pull up this card. Let's see what we got here. Ooh, right off the bat, I see that it's canceled. Never mind. Chas Skelly versus Grant Dawson. That would have been very interesting, but it was canceled. Let's start with the early prelims. Anything worth talking about in the early prelims? Sabrina Mazzo versus JJ Aldrich. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. If you got Fight Pass, definitely tune in for that one. That'll be fun. Brian Bam Bam Kelleher versus Ode Osborne, Ode Osborne is grayed out, so I'm going to guess that he's coming off the Contender Series. He's 6-2, so I'm going to guess that Kelleher is in there to bang and be banged. So, I just heard that. We're going to keep it in. Next, we got Alexa Kamur versus Justin Ledet. And anytime I get to see Justin Ledet's crappy afro mullet shaved head rat tail thing bounce around after he gets punched in the head, the better. It helps that he's kind of a tool in real life. So, always fun to watch Justin Ledet get beat up. Prelims. One more sip of coffee. Then we'll put it down. Okay, these are actually. Okay, so I've kind of crapped on this card to a lot of my friends because I've only looked at the main card. Okay, so they changed that. So when I looked at it, Anthony Pettis versus Carlos Diego Ferreira was the co-main event, and I was like, what? Huh? No disrespect to Carlos Diego Ferreira, but he's unranked, never really been ranked. I think he's almost in his 40s. He's 16-2, though, with a great record, but Anthony Pettis is just coming off a knockout of Stephen Thompson, and then a fight with Nate Diaz. This seems like dipping pretty low into the well here to get Anthony Pettis a win. That's what it seems like. He'll go down, he'll fight some lower level this fight makes no sense to me. You got Anthony Pettis versus a guy. All right? A guy. That's what you got. Luckily not the co-main event anymore, because that would have been a little embarrassing. Oh, Carlos Ferreira is only 34. He's only 34, but this is just odd matchmaking. Is it though? Because you want to give those guys outside the top 15 a chance to move in, create new blood. It's weird that you're going to try and create new blood with someone who's older than the old blood. But I don't know. I guess I'm not against it. But it's just, this isn't a pay-per-view fight. That's what it is. Like, these fights are all good fights, but like Maurice Green versus Alexei Oleinik is not a featured bout on a pay-per-view. You know what I mean? It's not the third. It's just not that. It's a main event of a fight night at best. Especially Maurice Green's coming off a loss and he's fighting up in the rankings. Confusing matchmaking on this card. It's like fights that not only are seem sort of below the pay-per-view level, but they also don't really make sense. Like, who else? Anthony Pettis. Who else could we... Who else? Back down at lightweight, again, for Anthony Pettis, by the way. Not going to stay at welterweight. It's up and down for Pettis. Who else could we have done at lightweight? Let's think for a second. Even Kevin Lee would have made more sense. Islam Makhachev. You know, if you want to go down in the rankings without going that far down, you can do it. Carlos Diego Ferreira is a bizarre choice. Maurice Green is a bizarre choice for Alexei Olenek. Claudia Gadelha versus Alexa Grasso is going to be a great fight. That's probably honestly, other than the main event, that's the fight I'm most excited for on the pay-per-view card. Holly Holm versus Raquel Pennington 2. I like Raquel Pennington. She's scrappy. She has that bulldog choke. I met her on the streets of Edmonton. Or was it Calgary? Yeah, it was Calgary when Tisha Torres was fighting in Calgary. And she was very gracious, very nice. Took a photo with me. So, sorry, Holly, but you know where my allegiances lie. Yeah, this is a weak pay-per-view. I took that back, but the more you look at it, the more you're just like, yeah. Claudia Gadelha versus Alexa Grasso, though, that's going to be a great fight. That could even steal fight. If McGregor versus Cerrone ends in a quick knockout, Gadelha versus Alexa Grasso, it could be there. Let's take a closer look at the prelims, though, and see. Drew Dober versus Nasrat Haqparast. That is a banger. That's a great fight. Two very talented dudes. Both of those guys deserve to be fighting Anthony Pettis over Diego Ferreira. Either of those dudes could definitely be fighting Anthony Pettis right now. You'd be wanting to launch them because they'd probably knock him out. But Drew Dober, 21-9. That doesn't really reflect how good he is. It's just too easy for Dober to get drawn into a firefight. His biggest thing right now is not even attribute or skill. It's just fight IQ, knowing when to go where. He had that fight against Beneil Dariush where he was just laying it on him in the striking and then went for a takedown for no reason and got submitted. He had a fight recently where he was doing the opposite. He should have been wrestling, and then he went to stand and bang with him, and he got... I should really have Tapology open. But you know what, guys? This is a relaxed morning episode. That's what I promised you, and that's what you're going to get. So I don't know a lot of stuff. I'm sipping coffee through most of it. Wait. And I'm saying but, and doing the thing a lot. So, we're going to move on. Tim Elliott versus Askar Askarov. I was super impressed by Askarov in his first showing in the UFC. I have a ton of notes on him that, again, because it's a morning show, I'm not gonna go look at. But I thought that his striking was crisp, even if he had some defensive holes that he wasn't really concerned with. It really is just striking defense for Askarov. His ground and pound is insane. His offensive and positional grappling is top notch, and I'm really interested to see how that interacts with the funkiness, just the general funk of Tim Elliott. Yeah, this is a hard one to pick. Or I guess I didn't pick. I'm going to pick Nasrat Haqparast over Drew Dober just on fight IQ. We got Tim Elliott versus Askar Askarov. I'm going to pick Askarov just because I think eventually the discipline and the orthodoxy is going to get to Tim. I think Tim did have probably the best fight against DJ before Cejudo beat him. But sometimes these really unorthodox fighters seem like they're doing a lot better than they are in the fight just because they're harder to figure out. Doesn't necessarily mean the other fighter is in danger. It's just the unorthodoxy leads to a more competitive looking fight when it's really just the other person trying to figure them out. So I'm going to go with Askar Askarov, even though this is definitely going to be the toughest fight of his career so far. We got Andre Fili versus Sadiq Youssef. This is my pick for fight of the night. I think this is going to be fight of the night. Fili's looked so good so far. He laid a licking on Sergio Moraes. I did an in-depth breakdown, I remember, on that podcast episode about the tricks and the reactions that Fili trained into Sergio so that he could land that head kick for the knockout. Sadiq Youssef is probably one of the most promising talents at featherweight. He's got dynamite in his hands along with crisp, clean striking. And the only thing about him that I'm not a huge fan of is that he's working with Lloyd Irving. And there are plenty of articles online about the Lloyd Irving cult, if you're interested in that. It's an interesting read. Lloyd Irving. All right, and then the last fight to talk about is Roxanne Modafferi versus Macy Barber. This is about as close to a cherry-picked match as you can get other than the main event. You've got Roxanne, the happy librarian, Modafferi, versus Macy, the future barber. Definitely change that name, because I know you're trying to say... Put it in front. Put it the future Macy Barber. Because when you go Macy the future barber, it just sounds like, hey, this fighting thing's not going to work out and I'm going to cut hair. That's what it sounds like. So you can't say the future barber, Macy Barber the future Macy Barber. Don't put it in the middle because your last name is a profession. So that's not going to work. Macy Barber, Roxanne Modafferi. Macy Barber's probably going to knock her out because Roxanne Modafferi doesn't really have much of a striking game. I'd love, again, to be proved wrong because her grappling is probably better than Macy's, but Macy is shown to be quite well-rounded, and she's working with Mark Montoya, who I think is a pretty good coach. I'd like Roxanne to win because I'm still salty over the fact that Macy won an early stoppage. I'm still calling that an early stoppage against Jillian Robertson, our girl. And, yeah, I've always said that, or we're going to proceed with the process that is weeding Roxanne Modafferi out of women's flyweight. Like I said, I think it becomes a legit division as soon as Modafferi isn't in the top 15 anymore, because as good as she is and as skilled as she is and as dedicated as she is and as good of an attitude she has and a great character, and she's a great addition to the roster, and she's a fantastic character, and I love watching her fight, and I love that she's part of this sport. She just has almost no athleticism or coordination at all, and a lot of people can beat her just based on athleticism. So I think as soon as we start to get these young people who are kind of just out muscling her and outworking her and out reaction timing her, I think that's when we're going to have the talent pool to call this, a very compelling division. And that's UFC 246. It's a bit of well, let's just say this. I'm not buying it. I'm going to the bar to watch it. And the last time I did that was when McGregor fought Aldo, and it's more because I just didn't have the money to watch it at home. So, take from that what you will. The prelims are good, and that's the free part. So I'm going to stay home and watch the prelims and get drunk, and then I'm going to go to the bar and drink waters. And they're going to be annoyed that I'm clearly already drunk and only drinking waters, but that's just the way it is. And I'm going to watch the pay-per-view for free, and then I'm going to call my girlfriend and give me a ride home. That's my plan. So, I feel like I should have given you guys a little bit more today. I could have gone... Well, let me know. You can always leave a comment if you're still watching this at the end. I've got I can talk about Jessica Penne and generally my thoughts on USADA and how they've screwed up this entire anti-doping policy for MMA. How it's not bipartisan, and how it's unfair and can be bent and can be completely bypassed by people with big name value. That there's a good reason for the UFC to sort of waive the charges on, but people like Tom Lawler and Frank Mir and I know there's more. This is why I'd have to look into it more before I want to talk about it, but they've ended some people's careers and they've tarnished their names, and I don't think it's a failure, but I don't necessarily trust that they are a independent body that's doing what's best for the sport. I think they're kind of catching the cheaters that they want to and letting the ones go that they don't need to. Like the whole Diaz situation, he got flagged for performance enhancer or whatever, a banned substance. It was from a tainted supplement from his company that he runs, and he just kind of went him on blast and said, F you, I'm not fighting if you don't clear this up. And they just did. And then you learn about Jessica Penne, who's been suspended for almost 4 years, past her athletic prime. She doesn't have the money to fight this in arbitration. She doesn't have the political power to say, F you, well then I won't fight. They're like, so what? And essentially it's just ended her career. And then this is another reason I don't trust them. Their response is like, we didn't force you out of the UFC. It's like, yeah, you did. Yes, you did. That's exactly the way she laid it out. It's like, through a series of circumstances that you've created for me, I'm not at competing age by the time I'm going to be back. So you've forced me out of the UFC. And they're like, no, we didn't give you papers that kicked you out of the UFC. So I don't know what you're talking about. It's just like, getting her on the technicality is actually exactly what everyone's upset about. So getting her in the technicality of her speech in your public response is probably the worst PR move you could have taken. What else? Oh yeah, Dustin Poirier called for the 165 division again this week. And finally, online, I'm starting to see some people being a little bit more pushing back on that. It's starting to get a little bit more even, because for forever it was just over and over again. When are they doing it? Oh, they're just waiting for a good time to introduce it. Oh, they're just waiting for McGregor to do the inaugural title fight so they can introduce the 165 division. Or I don't even know what the excuse is. They're not doing it because it's a bad business decision. I've been saying this from the beginning. It's a bad idea. That's not something you want to do. You're going to dilute two of the most stacked and money generating divisions in the UFC, and you're going to dilute them so that instead of established challengers to build championship metal and promotable fighters off of, what's going to happen is everyone who couldn't win a title at 155, and everyone, Kevin Lee could be the champ of 165 division. Well, let's make a whole division so that Kevin Lee can be a champion then. That's not how it works. That is not how it works. You don't just hey, man, RDA is so good, it's too bad he's not a champ. Let's make a whole division for him. No. Be good enough. Be good enough to be champ. If you're a little bit too small, there have been champs. Robert Whittaker was a little bit small for middleweight. He was a fantastic champion. You can be a little bit small. Volkanovski right now is a little bit small for featherweight. Fantastic champion. He's beaten the two people who we were arguing about being the GOATs of that division, of that weight class. He was smaller than both of them. Just be better. We don't make a whole new weight class for you just because you're kind of an in-betweener. It's so mind-blowing to me. And then we just have less fights to be made. And people talk about, like, you see the examples online, and people are like, wow, like, because wouldn't it be great if we could see Covington, like, because Covington would be a 165er, Stephen Thompson would be a 165er. Wouldn't that be a great fight to see? Or we could just watch it at 170 since they both already fight there. How many of these potential fight matchups are just the same dudes that are already in the same division at a different weight? Two dudes, by the way, that everyone knows aren't championship material. So we can just make another division. Oh my God. See, I'm already going off about this when I said I'd do it in another video if people wanted it. If you want me to articulate this a little bit better and really get going on it, I can. But at the end of the day, we'll have the people jumping in between weight classes like Pettis is doing right now between lightweight and welterweight. Oh yeah, now Pettis can have a new chance, and so people who we know. Tap the mute button there for a second. People that we know. This is how animated I am about this right now, by the way, and I'm so glad people are starting to agree with me, because it used to just be me getting completely shit on in every conversation I had with anyone about this being an issue, about it being a total, like, not good for business. you can make less fights. It's like, well, people can move between the weight classes. Yeah, why would you want that? Just have them all in the same place. Like, we don't want to make this more like boxing. Part of the awesome part about this is that it's not boxing and it's not super confusing to follow, and there's a good amount of weight classes. Well, they're stacked. They can they can stand being diluted. It's like, yeah, but then it's being diluted. I don't understand what's wrong with having a stacked division. I don't see why having it, you have to beat a lot of good people to get to a title shot is a bad thing. That's why these are the most compelling divisions in sport right now. I don't know. And so everyone who we know can't win a title is just going to move to 165 in between. And then what? And then we have just a pointless weight class and a pointless belt where the champions are what? What should we call it? Is it going to be interim weight? Because people hate the useless interim belts where we're just going to make a belt just so someone can be champ. That's exactly what this weight class is. That, or Khabib just moves up and beats everyone again, and now Khabib's a 2-weight world champ. Like, I just don't... People act like it just solves everything, and that it's also a great business decision, and I just don't see either of them. These are your two most commodifiable... Part of the selling point of Ferguson versus Khabib is that they have the longest win streaks in the deepest divisions. Their wins mean something. They're championship medal fighters before they ever get to the championship. Why would you want... So instead of having to go... I don't know. I don't know, dude. I don't know. I don't get the argument. I don't get it. I've never gotten it, and I'm glad people are starting to agree with me. I've been shouting it from the rooftops. If you want me to I could do 40 minutes on why this is a bad idea. I would just need to write some notes first. This is all completely off the dome. I'm sure you're not even listening by now, but I'm getting too heated. It's 9 a.m. I need to start getting ready for school. Thank you for listening, if you still are. I'm sorry about the long hiatus. I'm going to try and make sure that never happens again, but sometimes life happens. You get sick. There's mental breakdowns. There's fumigations. Dogs get injured. People get injured. Isn't that right? Isn't that right, doggy? All right. We'll see ya. I'm out.